Okay, in this lesson we are going to explore different generation modes that SP3 has to offer. And to make it a bit more interesting, I decided to save a new version of this, and I went to in here and save as, so that I saved the backup version from this. So instead of working on this ugly white material, we are seeing some materials in here. So let me take all of these, and I'm going to delete them and delete these forces as well, because I want to start with a default scene. Okay, and take this one and bring the sync to 0 so that it spawns on 0, 0, 0. Now let's bring in a default trunk and apply a material to it. Okay, this is good for now. And now let's go for the generation modes. Of course, generation modes have some settings. These are all of the generation modes, and they have some settings. For example, this is absolute, and you see these absolute settings in here. And these are specific to every mode that we have. For example, if I set it to Philotaxi, you see it spawning some Philotaxi settings. And then beneath that, there are some shared ones, and they are common between all of the generation modes that we have. So let's cover them first. And for a bit of visual interest, instead of using this menu, let's go in here, and this is now set to all. And this all makes it show all of the settings that we have here. But we really do not want to cover this for now, so I'm going to go to generation. And now we see the generation modes in here without any extra options. For example, if you want to manipulate the UV, you set to UV, and if you want to manipulate them all at the same time, you hit all. So let's go for generation, and this first set of settings are specific to every generation mode, and these ones are shared. So the first settings are boundary settings, and we have first, last, and clip. And let me add some branches in here. I'm going to use some preset branches. For example, these big branches. Okay, now we have something to work with. And in the boundaries, we have first. And you should know that the system in SP3, this hierarchy system, is called the parent and children system. For example, this trunk is the parent of this branch system. And let me add yet another branch system. For example, this little branches, and then these little branches are the children of these big branches, and then these big branches are the children of this trunk. And you should note that every time we say the parent, we mean the nodes that come first, and then when we say children, we mean the nodes that come after that specific node. So we have this in the between. This is the parent and this is the children. And in other mode that we have here, let's go for portrait. And now the bottom ones normally are the parents ones, and the top ones are children ones. So this is a good thing to have in mind, so that when we say parents and children, we have a common language to go. Okay, let me delete this one and select the big branches. And of course, you can rename the nodes if you want, rename the generators. For example, this is now big. You want to call it, for example, 01. The name changes. You hit F2 and then change the name of this one. Okay, let's go for first and last. This big branch node that we added adds a lot of the nodes in here. And the first determines the lowest point that a children can spawn on a parent. So this big branch is the children to this trunk, and this trunk is the parent of this one. And if I set this one to be a lower value, for example 0.1, you see the first comes into here, and this is the lowest point that it can spawn for us. For example, if I set it to 0, all of them are going to spawn right off the start of the parent, and for the last one it goes as well. Now the last value is on 0.9, which tells a speed tree to spawn the nodes even to the end of the parent. And if I clamp this to 0.5, you see it has removed all of the upper nodes it has. It acts like a clamp value to tell a speed tree where to spawn the nodes on the parent. And the clip value can cut off the branches by the specific value that you give to it. And it's going to cut off from top and bottom to remove any branches that beyond the range. The next options are rotation, position, size, and sync. You are familiar with the sync and how it syncs the geometry either into the ground plane or into the parent. For example, now we have selected these branches. If I hit sync and make it negative, it's going to take distance from the parent node. And if I go positive, it's going to make them go into the parent. And this is a setting that you want to be careful about using. So then there's the rotation. And let me go to the top view so that we're able to see that better. You see now all of them have the same degree in rotation. And if you want to vary it up, you can use the rotation to go for any degree that you want. And then there's position. And for position, it's gonna make them go up or come down, depending on this value that you give it. And then there's size, and this size is going to make them larger or smaller. And this size is going to affect the children as well. For example, let me select these and add little branches. And if I increase the size or decrease, it's going to affect the children that come after it as well. You see, if I make it a smaller, make the parent a smaller, the children are going to get a smaller as well. And then we have pruning, which is a curve. And this opens up an opportunity to look at the curve and variance system in a speed tree. So before that, let me make this larger, okay? And there are a lot of curves in a speed tree to help us randomize the things that we create procedurally to get the best result possible. And this pruning is one of them. And if you click on it, you're going to get this dialog box in here. And even for rotation and basically anything that you see in a speed tree, it has some curve so that you can randomize the values a lot better. A lot of the values have either the variance settings or the curve editor. So now let's talk about the curve editor. And without using these curves, a lot of the times you're going to get something that looks procedural, just like this tree. You see, the tree has a shape of the tree, but it's procedural in a lot of ways. For example, if we look at it from the top, you see all of the rotations are the same and all of the branches have been spawned in the same position, and the distance between themselves is the same a lot of the times. And this is not really what happens in nature. There are a lot of randomness in trees that make them possible. And the curves are here to help us achieve that. And let me delete these branches in here, these little branches. Okay, let's go for size so that it's a lot more obvious for us to look at. So this size, this static value that we put here is the maximum value. And if you open this, you see a 2D planes right in front of us. And there are a couple of points in here. And these points have either vertical or horizontal properties to them. For example, I can bring this down vertically or even create a new point and move it down vertically or horizontally, depending on my needs. The vertical position of this point controls the maximum value of that 0.1 that we added here. For example, we made the size 1 and this is 1 and this is 0. If you go top to bottom, you're controlling between the value. and in this case we have we have 1. So if we bring this one down, we are getting 0, 0.5, and 1, depending the value. It's subjective. And then there's the horizontal. And if you go left to right, you're assigning where that value should be applied. So let's double click on this to create a node. So we have created a value that has the maximum value in the middle of this. It's on top, and the top is the maximum value of this, and it's in the center horizontally, and it means that it's going to happen in the center of this node. So we have these branches, and everything that is going to happen in this area. So let me take this down, and you see these branches are getting smaller in size. And this is a good randomness that we can add to this. Or we can go the other way. I can take this one and bring it top even beyond the maximum value. Now we are multiplying the size in the center. So let me bring it down here, and this is not the only way that you can manipulate the curve. If you select this, there are a lot of curves that you can add. For example, S curve, which has some handles to make the transition smoother, or anything that you can imagine of. There are a lot of things that you can choose from. And even there's a draw mode, which you can draw a profile randomly to see the results. And now let's go for the default one, which is the max. And we want to tell a speed tree to make the branches on the top smaller than the branches on the bottom. So we go for size again, and as we want to apply the changes on the branches on the top, since this is going to be in the end of the generator, we are going to end of this one as well. So these are the branches on the top, and I'm going to make the size smaller. So I come down here. Now you see that the branches on the top are getting smaller in size compared to the branches on the bottom. And this is a good way of adding randomness to everything that you have in a speed tree. And these green curves that you see in a speed tree, they are called parent. These are called the parent curves, and there are some curves in other places that are blue, and these are called the profile curves. And there are some reddish ones which are called the resolution, and then some purple ones which are called the pruning curves, and some orange ones just like this one, which are the distributions. So let's explain them one by one. The most default one is in a speed tree is the parent curve, and this is what we have been configuring up until now, which is this green ones. And this is going to manipulate this node, which is a children, this one based upon the parent of it. So now in this case, the parent is now have been selected as the trunk, and this trunk is now the parent of this node that we are manipulating, and we are telling that in the end of the trunk, make the branches smaller. So let's add another level of branches. I'm going to add little branches, and I'm going to take these, copy and paste them by using Control C and Control V, and apply them on the tree generator so that we can have a side-by-side comparison. So let's hit W for move, and now we have these two side by side to each other. Okay, let's go and explain the parent properties, parent curve. So now I'm going to manipulate the little branches on both of them. So let's first go for the default one, which is this one, and let's go for size so that it's the most obvious to look at. Now we have selected the size scalar curve editor, and this is the parent. You see in here it's written parent and it's in green. So we want to select the parent, and you see in here it has a couple of parents. One is the 0, 1, and what is the trunk. And first let's go for the trunk. Now we are manipulating these little branches based on the trunk, not based on the big branches. And we have changed the parent. So I'm going to make the branches that happen on the end of the parent, which are here, and make them bigger. So let's make these bigger. And now you see they are getting larger based on the parent, which is this trunk. And now let's select this. Let me bring it over a little bit. And again, go for this little branches. And for size scaler, I'm going to, now instead of using trunk, I'm going to use 0, 1, which is this big branches. Now let's go for size scaler and big branches. And now instead of manipulating the branches based on the trunk, it's manipulating the branches based on this, which is the parent that we activated. So to make that obvious, I'm going to select these little branches and size scaler and the parent set to 0, 1, which are these big branches. I'm going to make the branches that occur first, make them a lot larger than the branches that are last. So let's select it. And I'm going to create a pin here so that everything is default in here. And I want to manipulate only a portion of it. So let's go back a bit and make this larger. And you see now the resizing is based on these parents, not the trunk. And if I change this curve, you see instead of going for trunk, it's going for the parent of this, which is this 0, 1 branches. So I hope that it's clear. You select the curve that you want to manipulate and decide upon its parent. And select the parent, and based on that parent you manipulate and randomize the thing that you have there. And another way of randomizing things in a speed tree is using the variance editor. And this variance editor is right aside this value that you put. This plus and negative value opens up the variance settings, and you can add the randomness settings to make it randomized as possible. Now let's go for rotation. We have the rotation in here, and if we go to the top view, you see all of them more or less have the same rotation. But if we want to add a bit of randomness into that, we can either use the parent curve or variance curve. Depending on your needs, you can use whichever you want. For example, if you want them to rotate in the bottom level instead of the top, you can go for parent curve, set the parent. For example, now the parent is trunk, and vary this number. Or if you want to have custom randomized value, you hit the variance and decide the variance value in here. Now I'm manipulating the size, I believe. Let's go for rotation. And now you see all of the values are getting randomly placed, no matter where they are placed on the tree. After this variance value that we add, there's a distribution algorithm, and you can use either to be uniform or random. This is going to be random per node, and it's going to be total chaos for getting the maximum randomness out of that. But if you want just little bit values, you make it Gaussian, and then it's going to make it go a smaller amount than that. The next up is the cohesion, and we have a slider here which is set to random. And if you make it cohesive, the neighboring pieces, the neighboring nodes are getting closer to each other. For example, let me make the rotation, and now since I have this slider set to cohesion, you see these two nodes that are neighboring to each other, they are moving with each other, and they're getting less affected compared to these larger nodes up there. And the nodes that are closer to each other are not getting so much different than the other. And if I set it to be random, You see, let's compare these two neighboring pieces. You see, by manipulating this, you see these neighboring pieces get a bit of distance from each other. If you set it to random, you're getting total chaos. And the next profile that we're going to explain is the profile curve, which is shown in light blue in all of the properties that's. And unlike the parent curves, which manipulated these nodes based on the parent, the profile curves are manipulating them based on themselves. And the changes that you make in the profile curve is going to be added to the single node regardless of their place on the parent. So, for example, on this shape area, we have the gravity. We have the gravity in here, and let's add a lot of the gravity to these branches. Of course, we will explain all of these later on, but this is a simple demo. So the gravity has now been set to max. You see everything in here is maxed up, and this is green, so you should know that this is a parent curve. And I want the top branches to be less affected by the gravity. So let's create a checkpoint here, and I'm going to bring this down. Now you see these are remaining in their own places, and from the center we are getting a decrease in the gravity. So let's make them all like this. You see the parent curve is applying on a parent level. So let's go and change this in the profile curve. This profile curve is going to add this value that we have here into individual ones, regardless of their place on the parent. So I want this middle area to be less affected by the gravity. So I'm going to bring both of these down. And let's delete this parent curve to see that better. So let's go for max. Now let's manipulate the gravity. Of course, you can draw as well. For example, let me draw, and I want this middle part to be affected by the gravity. Now we are manipulating the profile curve. So let's go for something like here, and in this middle part, let's go for top, and then come down, and like this. And then disable the draw, and we need to make it customize a little bit more. Let's add a checkpoint in here as well. And this is the profile curve that we added. Now let's select these, for example, and now let's bring them down. And you see, regardless of their place, they're getting the same gravity all over. You see, all of them have been now using the same gravity. And now let's go for something more obvious. Let's make this one max to disable it, and of course disable the gravity. Let's go to a skin tab so that we can change the radius of the branches. And this is light blue, and it means that it's a profile curve. And you see in the beginning of the branches, the radius is a lot higher, and as it goes to the bottom, the radius becomes thinner. And this is basically what you see in here. And let me take this and bring this one down also. And you see all of the branches get tapered in the end, no matter where they are in the parent. And if I take this, for example, let me take this and do some custom changes. And you see this profile has been added to all of them.